It started with a single text message at 10:30 p.m. It wasn't explicit, it wasn't a photo, and on the surface it looked completely innocent. It just said, "Thanks for listening today. You're the only one who gets it." That one sentence was the beginning of the end for a 10-year marriage. But to understand how a simple "thank you" can destroy a family, we have to go back to the seemingly harmless concept that started it all. The work wife. Stop believing the lie that emotional affairs aren't real affairs just because there's no physical contact. You might think having a work spouse is just a funny label for a close colleague, a survival mechanism for a toxic office, or just a good friendship. But what if I told you that according to recent psychological studies, 45% of men who have a work wife eventually admit to having romantic feelings for them? You've probably heard the term thrown around the water cooler. Maybe you even use it yourself. But at what point does a platonic bond transform into a marriage-ending threat? Today, we are diving deep into the psychology of the workplace romance, the subtle red flags you are definitely missing, and the exact moment boundaries get crossed. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where the line is drawn, and more importantly, how to stop yourself or your partner from crossing it. Let's be real for a second. We spend more waking hours with our coworkers than we do with our actual families. It is inevitable that bonds will form. You go through the trenches together. You survive the impossible deadlines, the unreasonable boss, and the stress of the daily grind. There is a shared language there, a camaraderie that your spouse at home simply cannot understand because they aren't in that building with you. Psychologists call this the proximity effect. We are biologically wired to develop attachments to the people we see every single day. And in the modern workplace, this is amplified by what experts call trauma bonding. When you and a colleague suffer through a high-stress project together, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin when you support each other. It feels good. It feels safe. And that is where the work wife title usually begins, as a badge of honor for a supportive friendship. But here is the crucial difference between a friend and a work wife. A friend is someone you grad lunch with. A work wife is someone who fulfills emotional needs that are usually reserved for a spouse. It starts with grabbing coffee, then it's daily lunches, then it's inside jokes that no one else understands. And suddenly, you have created a private world that your real wife is not allowed to enter. So, why is this dynamic so dangerous? It comes down to a concept known as the best self fallacy. Think about it. When you go to work, you are showered, you are dressed up, you are on your best behavior. You are competent, professional, and funny. Your work wife sees the version of you that is ambitious and successful. She doesn't see you when you're snoring on the couch, or when you're stressed about bills, or when you're arguing about whose turn it is to do the dishes. Conversely, your real wife gets the leftover you. She gets the version of you that is exhausted after a 10-hour shift. She gets the complaints, the silence, and the messy reality of domestic life. The work wife gets the highlight reel. The real wife gets the behind-the-scenes footage. And this creates a fantasy. You start to think, wow, my work wife is so much more fun, understanding, easygoing than my real wife. But that is an illusion. It is easy to be fun when you don't share a mortgage or schedule together. This is the trap. You begin to compare a fantasy relationship with a real one, and the real one will lose every single time because reality is messy. Now, let's talk about the slippery slope. Nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and decides to ruin their marriage. It happens in inches. It's what relationship experts call micro-cheating. It's the small breaches of trust that don't seem like a big deal in isolation, but accumulate into a massive betrayal. It starts with the topics of conversation. At first, you talk about work. Then you converse about your weekend. Then you talk about your dreams and fears, and finding use about your advisor's problems. This is the biggest red flag in the book. The moment you start complaining about your real wife to your work wife, you have opened a door that is incredibly difficult to close. You convince yourself it's harmless venting. You say, "She's just giving me a female perspective." But what you are actually doing is building intimacy with another woman at the expense of your partner. You are creating a triangle where your colleague knows more about your emotional state than the person you sleep next to. You are bonding over the perceived failures of your spouse. And the work wife? She often feels special. She feels chosen. She becomes the fixer or the confidant. It feeds her ego to be the one who understands you better than anyone else. It's a seductive dynamic for both parties. It feels like an emotional sanctuary, but in reality, it is an emotional affair waiting to ignite. But wait until you hear what happens when the technology comes into play. This is where the work part of work wife disappears. We need to talk about the digital tether. In the old days, you left work at 5 p.m. and you didn't see your colleague until 9 a.m. the next day. There was a natural boundary called home time. Smartphones have obliterated that boundary. Now the work wife is in your pocket. She's texting you memes on Saturday morning. She's DMing you on Instagram on Tuesday night. A recent survey showed that 70% of emotional affairs are discovered through digital evidence. It's not the texts about the meeting agenda. It's the texts that act as a constant, low-level hum of connection throughout the day. Did you see this? Thinking of you. This reminded me of our joke. When you are at dinner with your real wife, but you are smiling at your phone because your work wife just sent a funny observation about the boss, you are physically present, but emotionally absent. You are stealing attention and energy from your marriage and investing it in the office. This is what hurts the real wife the most. It's not that you slept with someone. It's that you gave away the best parts of your attention to someone else. Let's shift perspective to the real wife. If you are the real wife watching this, you know the feeling I'm about to describe. It's the crazy-making feeling. You notice your husband talks about Sarah a lot. He lights up when he mentions her. He defends her a little too vigorously. When you bring it up, what happens? You get gaslighted. You're being jealous for no reason. She's just a friend. We just work together. Don't be insecure. This is the most toxic byproduct of the work-wife dynamic. The invalidation of the spouse's intuition. Because technically, he hasn't done anything. He hasn't kissed her. They haven't booked a hotel room. So he feels justified in calling you crazy. But your gut knows. You can feel the energy shift. You can feel that you are now competing for his emotional bandwidth. And here is the brutal truth. The work wife often knows exactly what she is doing. Not always, but often. There can be a sense of power in being the cool woman who gets him,
without the baggage of being the nagging wife. It's a competitive dynamic, even if it's subconscious. So how do you know if you've crossed the line? How do you know if you are the villain in this story? I want you to take a mental test right now. It's called the window test. Imagine there is a window into your office and your real wife is standing there watching you interact with your work wife. Would you be comfortable with everything she sees and hears? Would you be comfortable with the tone of voice you use, the eye contact, the topics of conversation? If you find yourself deleting texts, that is an answer. If you find yourself tilting your phone screen away when your spouse walks in, that is an answer. If you have conversations with your work wife that you would never have in front of your real wife, you have already crossed the boundary. Secrecy is the fuel of an affair. The moment you start managing information to protect feelings or avoid a fight, you are engaging in deception. Now let's look at the fallout. Because when these boundaries break, the explosion is massive. The transition from emotional affair to physical affair is often much faster than people realize. It usually happens during a work trip, a holiday party, or a late night at the office with alcohol involved.
The emotional foundation has already been laid for months or years. The bridge is built. All it takes is one moment of lowered inhibition to walk across it, and the destruction is absolute. When a marriage ends because of a work colleague, the betrayal cuts twice as deep because of the gaslighting that preceded it. The real wife looks back and realizes she was right for years, while she was told she was paranoid. That destroys trust not just in the partner, but in our own perception of reality. Furthermore, it destroys the career. We forget that part. Work affairs are messy. When they end, and they almost always end poorly, you still have to see that person every day. You have to sit in meetings with the person who helped blow up your life. HR gets involved. Reputations are ruined. The sanctuary of work becomes a war zone. But is it possible to have close friends of the opposite sex at work without destroying your marriage? Yes, absolutely. But it requires a level of maturity and discipline that most people get lazy about. It requires building what I call the fence. A fence doesn't mean you ignore your colleagues. It means you clearly mark what is yours and what is the public domain. Here is how you build the fence. First, you talk about your spouse constantly and positively. When you are with your work friends, you mention your wife. You talk about how great she is. You share your weekend plans with her. This sends a clear signal to everyone, including yourself, that you are part of a unit. It kills the fantasy that you are a solitary agent available for emotional bonding. Second, you never ever complain about your marriage to a coworker of the opposite sex. If you have marital problems, you talk to a therapist, a pastor, or a male friend. You do not take those problems to a woman who could potentially fill that void. That is the cardinal rule. Third, you limit the contact to work hours. No late-night texts. No weekend memes. If it's not about the spreadsheet or the client, it can wait until Monday morning. You have to reestablish the digital boundary that smartphones destroyed. And here is the secret weapon for the real wife. If you are worried, ask to meet her. A work wife thrives in the shadows of your husband's separate life. She exists in a silo. Bring her into the light. Suggest a double date. Invite her to the company picnic and actually talk to her. When you humanize yourself to her, it becomes much harder for her to be a fantasy accomplice.
And when you see them together, you will know instantly. Body language does not lie. If the dynamic is inappropriate, you will feel the exclusion immediately. Some of you might be thinking, this sounds like a lot of rules. Can't men and women just be friends? Of course they can. But we have to stop pretending that biology and psychology don't exist. We have to stop pretending that intimacy is only physical. The most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to justify getting our needs met outside of our commitment. The term work wife implies a level of intimacy that rivals the real wife. That in itself is the problem. You only get one wife. You only get one primary emotional partner. If you are spreading that investment across two portfolios, both are going to crash. It comes down to respect. Respect for your partner, respect for your colleague, and respect for the vows you made. The thrill of a work flirtation is cheap dopamine. It is easy. Building a lasting marriage is hard work. It's boring sometimes. It's repetitive. But it is real. Don't trade a diamond for a shiny piece of glass just because the glass is right in front of you every day at the office. If you are the one with a work spouse right now, and you felt a twinge of guilt during this video, pay attention to that feeling. That is your conscience trying to save you from a disaster. Pull back. Reinforce the boundaries. Stop the personal texts. Redirect that energy back to your home. If you are the real wife and you feel like you're competing with a ghost in your own marriage, trust your instincts. You are not crazy for wanting to be the priority. You are not insecure for demanding that your husband's emotional life belongs to you. The workplace is changing. Remote work, digital communication, and longer hours are blurring the lines more than ever. But the fundamental rules of loyalty haven't changed.
A boundary is not a wall to keep people out. It is a line to show you where your safe ground ends and the danger zone begins. We have covered the psychology, the signs, and the solutions. We have looked at the damage caused by the harmless work spouse label. But ultimately, the safety of a marriage comes down to total transparency. If you can't tell your spouse about it, you shouldn't be doing it. It is really that simple. As we wrap up, I want you to think about the investment you make every day. Every text, every lunch, every shared secret is a deposit. Where are you putting your wealth? Are you investing in the relationship that will stand by you when you lose your job, or the relationship that only exists because of the job? The work wife is a role play. The real wife is your life. Don't confuse the two. Now, I want to turn this over to you. I've given you the signs and the psychology, but everyone has a different line in the sand. So here is my question for you. At what exact point do you think a work friendship becomes an emotional affair? Is it the first text outside of work hours? Is it complaining about the spouse? Or is it something else entirely? I want to see your definitions in the comments below, because I have a feeling the answers are going to be very different depending on who you ask. Let's talk about it.